All right. I am late. I was trying to experiment and do some other stuff, so apologize about being this late. I didn't even mean to be this tardy. But welcome to Piper Carter Podcast. You're listening to Piper Carter. Um, if you're joining me, the show runner is Beyond Beats, the environmental impact of hip hop culture. And I have a couple of things that I wanted to do for y'all. I was trying to play some music for y'all, but I don't know. It's acting kind of funky. So with that, yeah, I don't know why it's acting like that. Yeah, I really don't know why it's acting like that. Um, hmm. Let me see. I'm signing in here. Appreciate y'all being patient with me. Um, Let me see if this is it. No. Uh, so I don't know. I'll have to figure that out after. But let me see. Yeah, it's a lot going on here at the crib. I normally I'm at the studio for Piper Carter podcast at the but the weather's kind of dangerous out, so I'm just in my home studio in the basement. Um so please bear with me. Let me see. So today is the 23rd. And what are some things that I want to talk about? Well, like I said, the showrunner is Beyond the Beats, environmental impact of hip hop culture. I do want to let y'all know that this coming Saturday will be my birthday. I'm going to be 52. Can you believe that? That's very interesting that I'm going to be 52. I believe it when I see it. I'm like, yeah, I see it, girl. But 52 years that I've been going around and around and around. Um I had this song that I wanted to play for y'all, and it's just interesting the way the whole StreamYard situation is set up. I have to like put things inside of the video part with the branding, and I just didn't make it. I was I wanted to play this song for y'all, but I just didn't make it like in time to like play that song for y'all. So, but any hootie rooty tootie. Now I just gave y'all a couple of minutes to get up in here. So now that the gang's all here, I'm gonna quit this Serato. I was trying to figure out how to do the Serato as well. Um, it's pretty interesting, like Serato and Streamyard. So not really working, playing well together today, but gonna keep trying to play with it and see how it does. Uh, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quit this one too. I don't know if y'all can hear what I hear. My computer's on this last leg. I've got to get a new computer, which is interesting because I got this computer as a gift in 2019, but obviously they make the computers so that they go obsolete. Here, let me do this. This thing is driving me insane, honey. Okay. Um Sorry guys, thanks for bearing with me. It's like a lot going on here in the studio. Thanks for bearing with me. Trying to quit this Google Chrome because I'm using the Brave browser. Have y'all used the Brave browser? So, okay. So we're talking about the environmental impact of hip hop culture. So I had looked up some different artists that they say do hip hop music, right? And so I have a question for y'all. So like I said, some of the artists that they were saying was like Childish Gambino. They were saying that Beyonce. They were saying that SZA. Man, it was like a long list of people, but Lupe Fiasco. But something that I do wonder is if an artist has like one lyric that represents environmental justice, right? Does that make them like pro the environment? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. Um, but I think what the list was reflecting was like artists who had songs that had some sort of environmental thing to it, right? So like Childish Gambino, um, feels like summer, or yeah. So, but I don't think that that qualifies actually that the artist was doing music like that was like pro environment. So I guess part of my question is around um maybe like the role of artists and the environment. And so I kind of had some thoughts about that. Uh I kind of had some thoughts around that. So I'm going to my notes in my Google Notes, and please forgive me. Everything here is so slow. Um and here we go. I have things saved like all over the place, but I had to like redo some stuff to get back in here, and now I have to re-sign in. It's a whole situation. I was all ready to go for y'all, but can y'all hear that? It still hasn't. It still hasn't quit. Like the Google Chrome thing still hasn't quit. What's this? Is it? I don't know, honey. This thing still hasn't quit. I'm like, what is going on with that? Ooh, child. Okay. Anyway, let's see. Man. Okay. So there was a couple of questions that I wanted to also ask, right? So one of the questions that I have is about hip hop and politics, right? So can rap lyrics shape our public opinion in Detroit? I want us to think about that. Um so one part is like, it tackles the main themes around like exploring, I'm gonna say like local artists or Detroit based artists, right? That address political issues. Like, do we have Detroit based artists that address political issues? And like do they have an influence on community conversations and political consequences? So that's kind of something that I want to think about a little bit. I think of artists like Mama Soul. So artists like Mama Soul, although Mama Soul is from Flint, I consider her also Detroit hip hop because she does come to Detroit a lot. She performs in Detroit a lot. She has a lot of songs. She's taught in Detroit. She's worked with our youth. And she has a nice following in Detroit. So whenever I do events or women in hip hop events, a lot of people are like, "Are you going to bring Mama Soul?" And whenever um I talk about hip hop in a certain way, people, Mama Soul's name comes up. I would consider Mama Soul an environmental justice, like the marriage of environmental justice and hip hop, because if we're looking at the principles of environmental justice, that would also include the people. So air, land, water, um, and the people. And of course, she has songs talking about like gun violence. She has songs talking about um relationships, but like not just sexual relationships, but like familial relationships, or like mother and son relationships. Peace, Levon. Levon Pettis says, I remember when artists galvanized for the National Hip Hop Political Convention. Um, the one, what it was one that was here in Detroit, or do you mean one that was in DC, or do you mean one that was in New York? Just to be, I'm not sure which one you're talking about. But and I think Mama Soul talks a lot about her son, and making the world better, for her son. So you said it was an international delegation of folks working locally, nationally, and transcontinentally. Peace, Yeri, Kim, interesting. Never thought about environmental impacts producing and concerts have, but good to consider. And as you're speaking about it, I'm thinking about the justice part, the lyrics part, impact. So, shouts out to Yanash Taha, who is an international indigenous, Black and indigenous organizer. And I told this story on my podcast yesterday, but she has been for a couple of decades organizing events around disasters, right? So initially, when Haiti had the hurricane, or I'm sorry, the earthquake, um, she did hip hop for Haiti. And so she got different artists to come together, do like a telethon and an all day performance, and then raise money and awareness about the political situation in Haiti, but also connected with people on the ground to get them the supplies and things that they need, as well as some funding, as well as connect with trusted organizations that could receive funding, and we're doing the work. Levon Pettis says that Mama Soul will come to Chicago and support us here too. And my introduction to Yanaj Dahab was during the Flint water crisis, which Flint is not fixed. I got to let y'all know from the citizens of Flint that Flint is still not fixed. And also, too, that, Snyder got away with murder, and all the people that were, all the government officials and corporations like Nestle and others should be held accountable, and are the reason that there was a Flint water crisis. I talk about it all the time with the emergency management and them making the decision to change from the Detroit River to the Flint River. But I also want to shout out Princess Covergirl. We have a mixtape. We have a women in hip hop mixtape. We, meaning my organization, We Found Hip Hop. We've got 3 volumes of a women in hip hop mixtape that is on sound, that's available for you on SoundCloud. And Princess has a song on there about being poisoned, right? About Governor Snyder, you should drink the water that Flint drinks, and something to that effect. And so that's on there. I also want to acknowledge that there are 17 environmental justice principles, right? And the principles are all about demilitarism, about protecting, the environment, the people. There's and they were created by an amazing group in 1991 at the People of Color Summit, who came together, and that's where I'm going to say, like, our modern environmental justice movement grew, because that, historically, we know that it started in the 80s. And so here in Detroit, we have a plethora of environmental issues. And I personally have been involved in a lot of the efforts combining hip hop and, doing concerts, raising awareness, raising monies, um, connecting with people on the ground that are doing the work. And so I'm saying that just to say that um, there are instances in which people do it. I'm not sure if it's like actually a genre, right? And so I guess what I want to kind of explore today is, there's this whole I mean, well, it's definitely based on misogyny, but there's a whole movement around people critiquing and criticizing what's going on with women in hip hop, and there being, um, I'll say, an abundance of what did Sexy Red says? Stop calling it coochie rap. But I mean, I don't know another word because that's all people are talking about. So that's why it's difficult to know what else to call it. But with all due respect, whatever you know, rap, whatever the term is, but there's a plethora of like that genre, right? And so without talking about like, oh, we need to, shut them down, I guess I'm just thinking about, the internet and media and our appetites. And I'm wondering, like, do we want to have different media? Like, do we want to have, like, would y'all, we support artists, hip hop artists that were doing songs around environmental justice? Like, do we support that? I know that, the beats got to be hot and like it's got to feel good and all that kind of thing, but I'm wondering, is this, you know they say that y'all don't really want to hear stuff like that, right? um Another thing that I think about is like the health and wellness, like addressing like health disparities in Detroit communities. So thinking around hip hop that discusses like the unique challenges and solutions for health and wellness within our marginalized communities. So like, um yeah, like, do we have an appetite for this type of do we have an appetite for this piece? I want to say peace to Yolanda McNair. So, for instance, Yolanda's organization, um we've interviewed Yolanda on the platform. I've promoted her events, but it's Protect Our Stolen Treasures. I'm not sure if you remember her, but there's an episode, you could look her up, on Piper Carter podcast. It was from last year where we learned about her work and her case and everything. But I would consider what she does a part of environmental justice, right? Um, because for me, as an environmental justice activist, our environment is what we're protecting, right? And trying to make clean or whole or healthy or build, right? And so, um, making sure that we're safe, right? Whether it's clean air, clean water, um, securing our space where we live, like buying land, growing food, having community farms, and this kind of thing, but also our safety around, you know, like not being murdered. You know what I'm saying? And not being murdered by police and not being harassed and not being targeted and not being disrespected. You know what I mean? Because people are at the center of our environment. You know what I mean? As humans, like that's what we do. We connect with other people, we interact with other people, we communicate with other people. And for me, my work is centered in people because I believe in us having whole, healthy communities that are centered on the person. I know in Detroit we do have a plethora of music. I'm gonna call it like death hop. And it's a lot of music that glorifies death. And it's interesting because if you have conversations with a lot of the artists, they'll tell you, well, I'm just reflecting my environment. And if you listen to the lyrics, I don't really hear in a lot of the lyrics people saying like this environment is negatively impacting me and I want to do something different. What I hear in a lot of the lyrics is I live in this community and I'm also a part of the reason that people are scared to live in my community or something to that effect. I hear a lot of braggadociousness around killing one another and disrespecting women and disrespecting one another, like conversations like, I'll give you a baby and I'm not gonna pay for it. I'm gonna have sex with you and your mom and disrespect you both. I'm gonna treat you like crap. I'm gonna set you up. I'm gonna put some drugs in your drink, and I'm gonna set you up. I'm gonna take your money. I mean, I just hear all of this, or this just hyper capitalism. Like, I want to get all this money so I can buy these things. Like, I want to buy these expensive cars from these companies that don't care about me or the environment, that are ruining the environment. All these clothing from these clothing lines that don't care about me and add to the landfill, you know. And I just want to be able to like amass so much more than other people because that's what's going to give me some level of, self-esteem. But I'm wondering what our environment would be like if we had more um art and music that was is life affirming. And the only reason I say I wonder is because what I've heard from younger generations is part of the pushback is, well, back in the day, they had love songs and you still had murders and killings and gangsters and stuff. And that's true. That's true. That's true. Um, and while that's true, I think as an older person, I can say that that culture was unacceptable, right? Like the culture of um like disrespecting life, or the culture of violence, or the culture of murder, that was not a culture that people aspired to, right? Like that was not, people didn't sing about that because they were like, oh, this is good, or this is who we are, this is what we want to be, right? As a matter of fact, more music spoke to, I would say, like aspirational, right? Like because we came from these horrifying conditions, a lot of the music spoke to the world in which they wanted to bring forth, right? um that had love and beauty. And I'm not saying that there weren't, songs. That's what the blues is about, right? That's what the original R&B is about, right? Is that it's singing it's finding a way to transmute the pain, right, of the conditions that we were living in. But like, so Yolanda says that rappers are not speaking anything positive or encouraging. And you know what's interesting about that is, for at least the last 20 years that I've like been doing a lot of things in with young people, or even conversations, what's interesting when I have that particular conversation, um even with people in my own generation. So it's not even like a young person thing, right? As a Gen Xer, even with people in my own generation, the conversation is that we, you know, um aren't so I remember going to some different rap shows, or even seeing people on television, or even when I had my space. And consistently what they would say is, either something like, well, you ought to be happy that I'm here rapping, because otherwise I'd be terrorizing your neighborhood, right? So that for me feeds into the narrative that Black people should be disrespected because we're animals, we just can't control ourselves, right? So um which I fully reject, right? I fully reject that. I I'm sorry that I reject it, but I fully reject it because I'm like, the same people out of their same mouths, when something happens, are the same people that are saying, oh, this needs to stop, right? When something negative happens, some terrible, tragic violence happens, the first thing they'll say is, oh, this needs to stop. It's the same people saying, if I wasn't here rapping, then, y'all better be happy I'm rapping, or else I'd be at your house, robbing and stealing. Um, and to be honest, that's not who we are. Now, maybe that's a whole another conversation about the industry and what they want to create us to be. And Dr. Jared Ball always talks about how audiences are created, right? And when we're doing our media literacy, we understand that audiences are created. Furkan Khaldun says, Yasin Bey was saying something similar. Where does music, let me put it up here. Uh it says, where does music that affirms these negative, empty themes get us? What value can be extracted? And so, yeah, I guess I'm thinking of it like, who are the people that are doing all this life affirming music? I hear a lot of life affirming music in like the alternative space, but it's not hip hop. It's like this kind of I don't know if y'all know about Mara Ruby or Corinne Bailey Ray. It's kind of like um it's like R&B ish. It's kind of like pop R&B, kind of melodic pop R&B. Um I think uh something else that another like thought that comes to mind is we've been hearing for like 30 years or so. I'm gonna call them like prison raps, right? So there's this whole uh premise. My comrade sent me the article. I know y'all have seen this article. Maybe I'll just go ahead and pull it up. Where uh it remember the meeting with like Dr. Dre and well, you know what? I better not pull it up because just in case, I don't want to get one of them strikes in case they give me like false information because sometimes they do that, even when you tell the truth. But supposedly there was a meeting with the to create the gangster rap, right? Which I don't doubt, right? Just like the CIA says they never were involved in creating the crack epidemic, which we found out later. There was a whole report from the reporter that was murdered who brought the information forward, right? And so just like how a whole like culture of being addicted to drugs, right, was created to where it transformed generations, right? And it had a whole soundtrack to it, and the soundtrack was the gangster rap. And it makes sense, right, as a marketing campaign, because if you can market guns, especially purchasing guns illegally, if you can market murder, especially murdering your own community members, if you can market disrespect, especially disrespecting elders and disrespecting women and disrespecting a family and disrespecting children and disrespecting other people that look like you, right? Um, there's a whole soundtrack to that, like 30 years of soundtrack. And it's true. We did have all this stuff when we had R&B. That's a valid argument. And so, we definitely not taking our feet off the neck of, the systemic aspect, right? Poverty, right? All these, this commercialization of everything and the um and capitalism, right? Patriarchy. Those are the root causes of, of our pain that we're suffering, right? In our communities. And it's linked to climate change, is linked to, environmental racism, is linked to all of that. I look at it's interesting when people say, well, hip hop doesn't really have influence. I would beg to differ. I think it has a high influence, especially in our communities and especially with young people. Everything in America is about commercialism. Everything is about selling something back to us. Every single thing, whether mostly it's ideas, mostly it's selling ideas so that we'll be lulled to sleep. And so we'll just accept, certain things and keep buying stuff, right? Just like keep buying things, just keep buying things. Um I have a lot of notes about things that I was working on. So I think I want to add to this conversation when we talk about environmental justice that a lot of times we don't did that puppy? Yeah. A lot of times what we don't include in the conversation around environmental justice is the conversation about abolition, right? So recently, very recently, we have experienced deep trauma in our community, right? I did a whole episode about it last week, two episodes actually about it last week. So you can go check them out. I don't want to rehash all of it here. Um, but long story short, talked about our comrade and sister, you know, being murdered, right? And so the week before that, I had done an episode about critiquing Cat Williams, right? And my critique within that was around peace. And my critique was around the role of comedy, right? And particularly his comedy and his personification as a pimp, or the pimp, what would you call that? The pimp persona, right? And uh one thing in particular that bothered me was, around calling in a joke. He was joking about a little girl that was somewhere, I don't know, between 5 to 8 years old, and he jokingly called her a bitch. And so I was thinking about the role of comedy as well as a part of entertainment, and I'm including it in hip hop, and the ways in which we start to accept certain language, even in our daily, even in our relationships, right? And I was saying how um that although people might think that it's funny, right, in that moment, what happens a lot with humor, especially, or music, it goes into your subconscious part of your brain, which is why humor is very powerful. And those ideas go into your brain, and now it becomes acceptable um, to hear children being called bitches, right? And that might not seem like a lot to people, but after a while, it is, I would consider it a form of violence. I would consider it a form of disregarding life and someone's life. I'm saying all that to say that how it relates to our conversations around abolition, when we're talking about respecting black life and honoring black life, and doing, life affirming entertainment and life affirming music, and the ways in which entertainment and music and all these things can um actually have an impact on our psyche, right, and on our community. um think of uh like a campaign, right? Like a commercial campaign, or how many times you see a commercial before it becomes like something you whistle or hum or sing or think about, or you say the slogan, or you don't even think about it. These are ideas that are planted, right? That's why it's called programming. These are ideas that get planted, right? Like into your consciousness. So when we think about ideas around, are black men safe? Well, how many examples in our entertainment, whether it's through humor or whether it's through the music, do we, or the music videos or any of that, do we have this consistent messaging through images and words and poetry and music and comedy, that like black men are dangerous and black men are unsafe and they're going to hurt you, they're going to kill you, they're going to do these terrible things, right? And I would say that that also lends itself, I mean, and the same thing with Black women, right? She's gonna set you up, she's gonna lie, she's not trustworthy, she's, not worth investing in, she's gonna, hurt you, or she's, malicious and vicious and all this kind of thing. And or she's worthless, and the only thing she's worth is just to have sex with her and toss her. And anyone can have access to her or her body because her life is meaningless, right? Now, these are the messages that are in a lot of our music. These are the messages that help to create a certain environment. And I'm sure, because I've experienced it, I'm sure y'all have experienced it. Have you ever gone to a place and you get that feeling like you got to look around your shoulder and like keep your coat on? You know what I'm saying? And the music might be hot, you know what I'm saying? But you're like looking around because you're trying to figure out the exits, you know what I'm saying? Or have you ever been to a place and the music is very soothing and you feel comfortable and you feel like you can relax and just take your shoes off and you can even close your eyes and you feel good. So when people say that it doesn't matter, their sound and the sonic vibrations do matter, and they're a part of our environment, and they have an ability to shift the frequencies and shift in our environment. So anyway, I'm going to put a couple more comments up here. So Yolanda said a lot of Caucasian run music labels won't produce positive input from rappers. They project a negative life is what they want, and unfortunately the hungry rappers are pimping out their dignity. So let's talk about that. So um when we talk about, so that's a part of that link between like the world that we want, which in which we have access to clean air and clean water and great schools and education and health and optimal health, and our families are in abundance and beauty, and you know um and we feel safe and all of that. And what the capitalists, the world that the capitalists want us to be in, which is full of wars and competition and us at each other's throats, and this whole, philosophy of scarcity that's created, right? And a part of that, that I'm asking, is because we have an abundance of this kind of music, right, in our hip hop sphere, in our hip hop culture, as opposed to more life affirming music, right? Um, so, and then Yolanda also says, we as people need to honestly come together and work for positive changes for our communities. And so that's something that Yolanda's been doing uh, herself with her partner, and in, bringing people together to support, parents and families, that have been impacted by uh, having a young one of their children murdered by police, right? And but she's not limited to that, right? Like she um connects with other organizations and does a lot of other things in the community, and is making sure that the parents have things that they need, and that you know there's a healing component, and there's a lot of joy and beauty, right? Because we're not just our pain, we're not just our suffering, right? We're complete whole human beings that also need, right, that nourishment in that way. um oh, you got to get notifications, I feel you. So I wanted us to think about, like, who are the artists that are doing this kind of life affirming music? I mean, I know there's Rock, um that has a lot of life. SA-ROC. She has a lot of life affirming music, right? A lot of her music is very life affirming. I know that some of Rhapsody's music is kind of life affirming. I think uh I talked about Mama Soul, her whole catalog. I talked about Well, like I was saying, so I'm wondering, because like when I looked up some different artists and I said they were adding these different, artists to the fold, um, I'm kind of wondering like where they're getting that from. Only because uh I just don't agree. You know what I mean? That all those artists, I don't know. So let me say this about that. I'm thinking about like, okay, they were kind of naming like artists that might have had like some environment thing in their title, right? Or artists that may have had like one line, right? Or artists that may have had even one song. But I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily consider that as an artist that does like life affirming music or whatever, right? Um and I guess when I think about like environment, some other notes that I wrote here is like thinking about like using eco-conscious music samples, right? um like rapping about like composting, um bringing light to like sweatshops, you know what I mean, and the conditions that people have to work in factories and things. Uh just kind of thinking about um the ethics that so right now when we have had representation, right? Meaning we were able to celebrate that black artists um had clothing lines, right? So we had like Maurice Malone, and we had, Aniche and all these other, black owned brands, right? And so we celebrated that we had hip hop influencing, as you will, fashion and all these black owned brands. And I think at that time, representation was very important because we didn't have representation. Like, we were buying all this stuff and doing all this stuff, but not involved, right? And I think over the last couple of decades, with a lot of black people being involved in fashion and having brands and this kind of thing, we've come to better understand that a lot of um so there was a couple of different ways that they were doing it. So one was there was a clothing line, and then they would get with a like a famous, rapper or producer or hip hop persona, and they would say, "Well, let me use your name." And so they put the name on it, right? So they wouldn't have to think about all the production part, the business part, the ethics, right? Whether they're using sweatshop labor or any of that. Then you had other people, right? Like your April Walker and the Walker Wear and some of your others, even Maurice Malone, who uh were actually involved in the production, right? So they were actually connecting in China and connecting with, people that actually make clothes and, involved in the entire, stream of the process, right? And so um we celebrated that, right? And I think uh as hip hoppers or whatever, what we were celebrating was that idea of like that come up, like the entrepreneurship. They're owning their business, they're owning their brand, they're making decisions, they're making their money. I think where we are now, though, in 2024, that we know about climate change, that we know about environmental justice, that we can think about conditions in factories, and we want to resist against sweatshops, and we want to resist against hyper consumerism, and you know um thinking about the ways in which workers are treated, and thinking about the ways in which you know we're actually making an impact in society and in our community. I think a different conversation to have in this moment is um maybe the role of like shifting the mindset from being a consumer, right? I was going to say from being a consumer to becoming a producer. That's what I used to always say. And I'm gonna say it's not even necessary that we produce so much anymore. Like there's so much that exists on the planet. I know a lot of um where we are now, like what does that conversation in hip hop look like? That's not about hyper consumerism. That's not about buying things or one upping people or getting all this blood diamonds, where they're chopping off children's hands and stuff for you to look cute, or for you to wear a chain, or not thinking about where the gold comes from, or the impacted communities that aren't even benefiting from these industries and these corporations that are in these people's communities and extracting from them, and charging exorbitant rates, and just terrorizing people in communities and murdering them, right, for their resources and their labor, so that the West can have their needs, right? And how do we as people in hip hop start to create those connections of us, you know, being connected to these people, right? So there's a whole consciousness on the left around anti-capitalism, right? And what's interesting about anti-capitalist framework, I think, especially like in my community, um, I don't even think people talk about capitalism or anti-capitalism. Do you know what I'm saying? In my community, in my neighborhood, what people talk about is getting money, getting paid, becoming rich, this kind of thing. And so they look up to like your Jay-Z's, and they look up to, people that, have are hoarders of resources, right? And the billionaires and things. And they look to say, well, this person can be, successful, but the definition of success is accumulation, right? Of things, of wealth, of money. I think what we don't talk enough about in our communities, or I would like to see us figure out more, and highlight and discuss and uplift, especially in our music and our conversations, is what would it look like for us to actually think about the purpose of education? Like, what's the role of education? Like, why are you getting educated? Are you, at a certain point, education was just to get a skill so you could enter the workforce so you could just make money, right? And while that is true, that needs to happen, I think we're at the point where we think like, but to do what, and to serve what purpose, and how does this serve community, how does it impact community, and like what role does community have, what role uh do the youth have in community? I feel like we're at that moment, right? So whereas like back in my day, it's like, oh, well, you want to go to school, get your education, get your money, and like that was the goal, right? Or but be whatever, but like that was it, like that was the goal. I think, especially living in Detroit and seeing how um especially with this whole Stephen A. Smith conversation, everyone is up in arms about what Stephen A. Smith said. I think if we're critical though and honest, on the one hand, yes, it's disrespectful the way he said it. He's not from here. And I think that the critique is kind of valid in a way, but the parts of the critique that I find are valid is not really like to underscore, to confirm what Stephen A. Smith said. It's more looking at like the evidence of our failed leadership, right? So for Detroit to be an 80% black city, or mostly, black city, and to have mostly black leadership, but for the downtown to have all the resources and the other neighborhoods to not have resources, and our so-called leadership consistently give us excuses, is unacceptable, right? There's always an excuse, and it's unacceptable. And so, you know, it's an election year. Things are about to heat up. We're about to have more of these conversations. I'm probably rambling and all over the place, but it's all connected, trust me and believe me. Um so Christopher, and I don't know who Christopher is, but I am going to put your comment here because it's an interesting comment. You said, I'm not an expert, but I feel Detroit is losing its identity, so the music doesn't have the same impact. I would wonder like what impact Detroit's music had. I mean, I think techno has had a worldwide impact. I think Dilla has had a worldwide impact, but until recently, people didn't even know who Dilla was. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. That's a whole different conversation. But I'm saying, rest in peace. A lot of people just found out who Aunt Fiddler was. I was on the board of this prestigious arts organization that did this really prestigious event, that did this really prestigious fundraiser. And I almost had to I had to twist their arms to force them to hire Amp to perform. Um that was one year. The next year I had to force them to have Monica Blair perform. There's so many challenges in Detroit with regard to the consciousness or the lack of consciousness with I'm gonna say our leadership or our elected officials, right? I know our elected officials are kind of represent our community because like we see them everywhere, we know them, they come like from the community, they listen to the same music we listen to, you know what I'm saying? They're impacted by the same things that we're impacted by. Now there's other things like I can't make accusations of how they benefit or don't benefit. But I'm just saying, like, culturally, right? Culturally, what would Detroit, a city where everybody has a fur coat or multiple fur coats with a matching fur hat, mink, by the way, chinchilla, and other things, where, and I'm saying that to say that maybe you only need one fur coat. You understand what I'm saying? I know Detroit gotta have a fur, but maybe you just need one. Um, a city where in the neighborhoods the water is poisoned by lead and other contaminants, and so is the water in the schools, but the school sends home a letter with the children to give to their parents, so their parents probably don't read it, that says that they're going to shut down the water fountains and the kids can't use the bathrooms um because the water is contaminated. um where the schools have gotten to a place where they made a decision that they want to put police inside the schools as security, but they don't even have, they've, you know, out of 1,500 kids, they don't even have a counselor, right? And you're talking about um public schools with populations that, and I only know this from working in schools, working with schools, with populations that have about 50, 60, 70% of young people that don't live with their parents, right? They live either in some sort of foster care home, or some, you know, maybe it's a grandparent or an aunt, or uh, some guardianship situation, right? And shouts out to everyone that's doing a great job taking care of kids, because don't want to shade any of you. I'm saying that to say, though, that all of that is a part of our environment, right? The ways in which children are disrespected, when you see that we don't even have a decent transportation system in Detroit. Not sure that people remember how the initially People Mover was created, but that was also a scam, because that conversation came from monies that were supposed to go to improve the bus infrastructure. Okay. Pay drivers more money, put more buses on the roads, fix existing buses, this kind of thing. But long story short, it turned into the people mover that goes around in a circle. Fast forward like 30 years later, the same thing happens with the Q line. And I don't know if y'all remember, and the only reason I remember because I was involved in the protests with People's Platform against the Q line. Well, the Q line started out as Dan Gilbert having conversations with the city or with DDOT saying, and if you're trying to figure out like what this has to do with environmental justice, transportation is a part of environmental justice, right? And improving transportation and making sure that the transportation is safe, that it works for the people, that it's convenient, that it serves the people, that it isn't, producing toxins that um, anyway. So the initial conversations were Dan Gilbert um had conversations with DDOT and was like, look, because DDOT was like, people were complaining, right? The same thing, like the drivers weren't being paid properly. They were, consistently being laid off. They had a lot of buses that were down, broken. They didn't, have money to pay mechanics. They a lot of times, the different like air conditioning or the heat and things like that weren't working on the buses. So people weren't being paid their overtime. Like it was a lot of challenges. They didn't have enough drivers. That's why the lines were taking so long. So we already know that these corporations and in the suburbs and all that, they didn't want Detroit anyway to be not a car city. Like they wanted it to stay a car city to boost their reputation as well as their pockets, right? About being an automotive city. So they've always resisted against us having a decent transportation system. But when Dan Gilbert was having conversations with DDOT, the conversation was, okay, this is what we'll do. I'll invest in the infrastructure for the bus lines. And it was supposed to do just that because initially they were he had promised that the bus line would be extended all the way to Pontiac. Okay. And so that would allow people who live anywhere in between to get back and forth to work, which would boost the economy, right? And convenience. They were supposed to add more buses on all the lines, fix the buses, pay the drivers the overtime, all the things, right, that make the system workable, right? And more efficient and run better for the people. So fast forward, once they agreed and signed paperwork and all that, then he flipped the script and what created in the middle of the process a 501c3, he turned it into a nonprofit, okay, and then connected with all the, like, I think the universities that are along the line and had each one of them donate so that there was, so that they were contributing financially to the line, right? And so that's why if you go on the Q line, you'll see that there's like a Michigan, what is it, University of Michigan, and anyway, each thing has their little stop, right? Their name on the stop. Then he was like, you know what? It was supposed to be like high speed. Well, they call it high speed rail, but it goes like 2 miles a year. But it was like, this is gonna go to Pontiac. So then that was the deal, that thing would go to Pontiac, right? And somewhere in between there, they decided that anyway, he lied and that didn't happen. So then they sold us on, oh well, guess what? You can go from New Center right? No, then they said it was going to go to 8 Mile, but then they changed it, and then they say, well, it's going to go from New Center to downtown. So now we have another useless, expensive transit project that doesn't serve anyone for real. They spent all that money on it. First it was like $1 or something, but now it's free. They charge sometimes they don't. And I guess you can park there and then get on it and go to games, whatever, but it's still dumb. Like the people mover is still useless, right? Like the people mover. And the transit activists and things are actively trying to get people to ride the bus because what the rhetoric is that Detroit doesn't have enough bus riders. Which, if you know, like I know, a lot of Detroiters, they don't ride the bus because the bus doesn't serve people. Because if you have kids, you see your kids outside and it's black outside. You'll see kids that are like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old outside at the bus stop trying to catch the bus to go to school because they got to get up like 3 hours early because the buses are going to be late. Right. And this is the life. Like when I was a kid, back in my day, you only need a couple minutes, right? Catch the bus, right? You go to school, you want to catch the bus. I could walk to school, but I could also catch the city bus to school. It was like a 5 minutes wait, or whatever. But nowadays, you might have an hour wait, 45-minute wait. You know what I'm saying? Detroit had last Monday, it was 3 degrees. Okay. We already have a janky education system. It's a lot of kids that have to, or people that have to miss work and school because the bus doesn't work. Right? It doesn't serve people and it doesn't work. And because they took the monies that were supposed to go to reinvest into the transportation system and put them and tank them into something else, we don't have, and again, they make it so difficult. We don't have a proper transportation system. But I just want to remind us, because I am talking about the intersections of hip hop and and environmental justice. I'm wondering, like, how Trick got that no-fly zone when I was working. I used to work at Shane Park as assistant stage manager. And remember when Youngberg came and they jumped him and like took his chain? Allegedly, Trick was working with the radio station who brought him, and they say he had somebody dress up like the person with the sign to like pick him up, and they picked him up and beat him up and took his chain. We never got to do the Summer Jam show, and we were calling and looking for him and stuff. And then I was working at Shane Park when the whole Rick Ross thing happened, and uh, they had all the police. Trick had all the police lined around Shane Park, not letting Rick Ross get out the car and get on the stage. It was a whole thing. And I'm wondering, like, do you all remember? Was it 2020 or 2021 when those white supremacists came to Detroit and marched at the TCF Center? Well, it's the Huntington Center now. It used to be Cobo Arena, but now it's at a certain point it's TCF Center. Do y'all remember when those white supremacists came and all these so-called activists were not present when it was women and elders that pushed them back because they was trying to rush them downtown when they were in doing the I think it was the voting. So I'm wondering, like, Where was hip hop in those instances? Like, where was that no fly zone? How come the no fly zone was for like Rick Ross and some foolishness and Young Bird over some stupid ass chain, but not for people's grandmothers that are civilians that were just trying to vote? Child. But there's so many records about foolishness and nonsense and death culture and murder and just glorifying it, and capitalism and consumerism and you know uh all this negative uh uh personification of treating women terribly, and not respecting people, not respecting life, not respecting children, not respecting our people. And so I'm wondering, like, with all the environmental injustices that we have in Detroit, what would it look like to have an environmental justice hip hop movement that's life affirming, right? With banging beats where we're banging, you know, and letting people know about our water crisis, right? The lead in our water, and that we're still powerful, and you know that we need to improve our air quality, right? Do we know that in Southwest Detroit, that 48217 is the most poisoned zip code in the state, and that Marathon oil is there and been poisoning people for about 30 years, and people have died and have gotten cancer. And initially, they paid all the white folks so they could move, and they were able to move and get a house. They didn't even tell black folks what was going on. And by the time they found out, a lot of them either weren't able to move and sell their house, or it was too late and they got sick. And a lot of them ended up being stuck. And some of them stayed because that's their community and they own their house and they just can't leave. And I want to shout out to, Mama Teresa Landrum, who's still there fighting for her neighbors, right? These are the types of issues that I want to see us, um, in 2024. I want to see us have mixtapes around that. You know what I'm saying? Like, as many issues and challenges as we have here. Like, that's real hip hop. That's hardcore. You know what I'm saying? The stuff that's happening to people. I say it all the time on this platform, how um, the Department of Water and Sewage has a policy to where they remove children from the home. You know what I'm saying? How they remove children from the home, and yeah, we have to talk. Yeah, so where they remove the children from the home and criminalize black women. You know what I'm saying? Because they can't afford their water bill, right? Like, we need lots of songs about that. I will say though, it is an election year, and thanks to the People's Water Board in Detroit, and thanks to the people in at We the People of Detroit, um, there is a bill called I think it's called the Water Affordability Act, and Rashida Tlaib put it forth um, in the Congress. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it is supposed to be up this year for a vote. Uh, so um, let's put a lot of energy on that. Let's see what you're talking about here. Okay, so this is Free Palestine, Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tigray, Haiti, and Ugair. So peace. Unfortunately, hip hop got captured by the capitalists, as I'm sure you know. With the 2000s came the explosion of the ditties and groups like Diggable Planets, Tribe, and De La Soul leaving. So we need that back. That's basically what the show is about. What's interesting? I produce a lot of events, and one of my biggest challenges is coming up with the money to bring the artists. Like, when I reach out to artists, the first thing they say is, "Well, how much you got?" And I'd be like, because like this is for the community. It's coming from the community, and my community don't have. You know what I'm saying? We don't have the money to bring you. Even some of these inexpensive artists want like 20,000 just to show up. But just because some of these other artists want like 80,000 and 50,000 and stuff like that to show up. And then once the artist shows up, you still have to pay for a first class hotel room. You still have to pay for them plus, their DJ. You know what I'm saying? A plane ticket for you have to buy all first class tickets. You have to pay for a 5-star hotel room. You have to pay for a top notch, bonded, insured driver that these are contractual things, you know what I'm saying, that doesn't drive anything less than like a 2024 navigator or whatever some top of the line transportation vehicle is. And they have to have special food and this whole thing. So I mean it's very difficult to because of the nature of the way that all this stuff has changed, because of the way in which capital has, like you said, captured um, the culture. It does make it difficult, even in the community, to ask artists to come and do things. I mean, to be honest, even artists that are doing favors are coming for like $5,000 and $10,000, and in my community, that's still a lot of money to come up. I mean, $1,000 in my community is a lot to come up with to pay artists and stuff, to pay all this other stuff, right? So the 5,000 and 10,000, that's a lot of money to come up with to pay these artists to perform for a community. And then it's like, how do you justify that? Like we're asking for an artist to come like support our impoverished, marginalized community that already doesn't have resources. And then somehow, although we're saying that people can't afford, clean water or their electric bill or decent transportation, that we got to find like $10,000 to pay an artist. And, we got to find ten to $20,000 so that an artist can be okay, because of their principles. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. And I support artists, so I'm not trying to be like that, but I'm just saying that's kind of the reality of, what we're dealing with. So I'm wondering, how do we balance that? Like, how do we got to figure out how to balance having artists step up to the plate, make music that's more life affirming and reflective of our values, and be able to come to the community. And we want to take care of artists. I'm not trying to, artists got bills to pay and lives to live and families to feed. So I'm not trying to diminish it. I'm just saying, from the community side, I think I get lectured by a lot of artists who tell me about their value and how I should value them and this kind of thing. And it's like, I know the value of an artist. I appreciate artists. I think that artists should be valued and they should be invested into. I just think that um expecting community members to pay the same rates that that artists charge like a university, I think that's preposterous. You know what I'm saying? Now, if the community can convince the university to, foot the bill, then I think that's dope. You know what I'm saying? But that's not necessarily always the case. So but anyway, I could go on and on and on. But I just wanted to start this conversation here. This won't be the end. I want to continue this conversation throughout the year and hopefully expand the mixtape project that I've been doing. And initially, it's all about women in hip hop. I may have it continue to be centered on women in hip hop, and Let me see. I think my husband is listening to me upstairs. I hear it down here. But I'm thinking that, this is the beginning of the conversation that we need. These are conversations that we need to continue to have, because another reason that we get a lot of the content that we get is because of who's paying for the music, like you said, right? You Free Palestine, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Tigray, Haiti, and Ugair said that our culture has been captured by the capitalists. And unfortunately, when artists are being paid, then they get to um, make decisions around who they're going to uh, please. Yeah, who maybe that's what it is. Who they're going to please, who they're going to appease. And so I think it is necessary that we try to figure out how we're going to mitigate, because we're going to continue to get death hop, if you will, um, if we don't take over. You know what I'm saying? Like if we don't figure a way to like take over, and I don't want to say take over, like it's not like we're gonna be in, we'll never be in competition with like Sony or Universal Music, but there was a time, okay, and there was a time when, like, when I was a little girl, where what we did, like, didn't have nothing to do with them. And I feel like that still exists. I feel like that possibility still exists. Like, especially with this internet and this YouTube and all these tools that we have at our disposal, and us being in the street more and us being connected with one another more, we have an ability to impact our environment. We have an ability to impact change in our environment, right? And make and create our audience and create our, they say, doing all these like marketing classes and stuff like that, right? And in the marketing classes, they say all you need is your 1,000 true fans. And that is what I'm building for my like brand. It's also what I'm supporting my artist Aisha in building, like, for her brand. And I think about how um collectively as community, I feel like somehow in that's a good process for us to think about when we're doing our political education, when we're doing when we're trying to grow our community, we're trying to grow the consciousness of our community. Like, that's a big question. Who is our community? Right? Like, who's with us? Who are we talking to? Who shares our values? Who wants to be down, or who do we want to be down with? Right? Who do we support? Who supports us? Um Ideally, we want to say everybody, but realistically, we know that there are people who this will resonate with, and there are people who it won't. And as many murders that are in our community, as many, atrocities that happen and tragedies and things that happen in our community, there's still a very strong, consistent appetite for that sound, for that music, for that culture, for that. And so it's that, right? Like, when we talk about like how we're going to get their attention, like, how do we get their attention? And so over the course of 2024, that's what I'm going to be thinking about. How do we garner attention for the life affirming projects and music and comedy and media in our community, that highlights our community, that celebrates our community, that lifts our community, that propels our community, that's life affirming, and something different, right? That's very needed and very necessary. And there are artists that are doing what I would call like conscious hip hop or more positive hip hop. I think what we also need is artists who are thinking about our environment and our climate and our planet and the ways in which we treat one another, what we eat and you know who we support and just the whole thing. Like we just need a culture reset. We need to reset our culture. We need to create safer spaces where we can gather together and amplify our culture. We need to support media outlets. Like I'm gonna shout out, Detroit is different as a media outlet that's here for a community that does this work. But there's other media spaces that are doing this very work to like bring you healthy media. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the more and more that we encounter, this these positive, vibrations, this is what we got to spread. This is what we got to share, right? On our social media, in our communities, in our homes. And this is what we got to make hot. This is what we got to make normalized. This is what we got to make popular. And I just wanted to come on and do this kind of show to kind of think about, after last week's show, like what are some things that we can do. And I was saying something that I want to do. Maybe, hey, what's up, Norman Clement, another person. Look at all these community leaders that are in, another person that's in the tribe, right? We doing hip hop caucus together. But this is Detroit change maker, you know what I'm saying, that uh Norman, you know what I'm saying, is a person, a father, and a husband, and a community leader, and just, doing his thing in community and in all these meetings and fighting for us for our, all of our voting rights and things like that. And so this is the new culture. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's up to us. You know what I'm saying? It's something that I'm feeling in my heart. I'm feeling compelled, especially coming off the heels of Kelly's murder last week. And it's, and unfortunately, rest in peace. Um, she's one of so many, you know what I'm saying? And uh it's just to normalize this death culture, this, hate culture, this, culture of just not respecting life. It's too normalized. And just like how we was dancing to all that Busta Rhymes and Puff Daddy and Biggie and Nicki Minaj or whatever else you like, they just have hot beats. If you take the hot beats, you can put other stuff with them hot beats. You know what I'm saying? Or you can create hot beats and have better messages, way better life affirming messages. And I just think in 2024, you know what I'm saying? Like people are sick and tired of all this war and destruction and death. You know what I'm saying? Like people had enough. And I think that's why like younger generations are leaning more towards, these vocalists that are doing all this beautiful music, which I love. And we got to transform hip hop. We got to make hip hop more life affirming. And we have to make hip hop that is more life affirming. So I think a, a like the mixtape that I have been working on, a couple of things I'm thinking to do for Native. I said on my other podcast, I want to think about how to make an impact, in the community, right? I want to think about how to make a better impact in the community. I think when I say the community, I'm talking about like hip hop community. And something that I think I is on my heart, I want to do, I think like a either like a writer's workshop that's dedicated to Native child, I'll say, and or a mixtape series that's dedicated to her, to where she, maybe it can, be dedicated to like mental health, and just because on one of the other mixtapes that I did for women in hip hop that's on SoundCloud, we did give them prompts, and they were doing songs about mental health and self-care and things like that, and also domestic violence. And so I think continuing in that theme, I want to for my women in hip hop org, I want to do another mixtape series where we're really centering uh these songs that are life affirming, and these and get this out to people, and have like a writer's workshop, you know what I mean, so that um not just young people, because artists can really think about what they're saying. And yeah, that's right, Yolanda, time to grow up. More Andre 3000. That's what Norman said. More Andre 3000. I'm feeling that. We got to bring Norman on here to talk about his work again. We haven't had him for a minute, so we got to bring him back on, doing a lot of powerful work. So shouts out to you in gratitude. Also, too, I was thinking about um when I had my youth program, and we were doing Dilla Youth Day, I had Kari and Sterling train our youth. So Dilla has a song called F the Police, and it's so awesome. The beat is just make you go cuckoo. Um and I was like, oh, for the youth day, I said, I want the kids to perform F the Police. And everybody was like, pipe, the kids can't do F the Police. So we were trying to think like, okay, if the kids can't say F the police, like what can the kids say? So Antonio was like, they could say, watch the police. So we were like, watch the police. So we took the Dilla beat, and there's a youth group called Detroit Urban Strings. Shouts out to Cecilia Sharp, and she had the young people that she trains in violin, and viola, cello, and bass learn the string section to F the Police. And then our kids, which were doing hip hop and rap and stuff like that, they worked with Kari and Sterling to do a training around stop and frisk and know your rights, and police terrorism and things like that. And so they it was like about a 3-month workshop where they worked on that, and they wrote the lyrics, and then they practiced, they put the song together. So then when they performed the song at Dilla Youth Day, that song was so tough. That song was so hot. Because they were telling their story about being young people in Detroit being harassed, terrorized by police, and what it's like. And they got to the part like, everybody say 1 2 3, watch the police. Yeah. And what was hilarious is that Dilla Youth Day was so packed. It was like, I don't know, it was hundreds of people in there, and we were like packed in like sardines, and everybody was like Earl Flinning and just throwing their hands up. It was so hot, and everybody was just like, it was thumping. The parents were having a great time. The kids, like that joint was popping. And all I remember, I looked, and somebody had called the police. And I looked at the door. I said, "Uh-oh." So I, had to go pew, cut straight to go see, how you doing, officers? You know what I'm saying? Like, so don't mess up the party now. But they just looked in, and they was like, "Yo, this is dope." And they were just like having a good time like that. I was like, "Whew." But you know, I'm saying that to say that even though what they were saying, you know what I'm saying, probably was like, whoa, it was so powerful that it even made like the police be like, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that because I'm like, uh like trying to like, promote y'all on police or anything. I'm just saying that to say that that's the type of vibration, you know what I'm saying, that we can have. um I'm saying a collective we, if we just, and it's funny because the young people were like, oh, this is corny. But when we presented the idea, initially, oh, this is corny. We want to rap about what we want to rap about type thing. And, I had to like negotiate with them, kind of beg them a little bit, like, come on, y'all. And I mean, that song was in their repertoire for like years until our youth program ended. And everybody loved it. Adults loved it, their peers loved it, and it was a dope tune. You know what I mean? My Dukes loved it, and I'm just saying, like, this is the power that our music can have. That song MOP, Annie Up, living in New York City, whenever that song would come on, and I've heard this in different cities, whenever that song would come on, mayhem would burst out. There'd immediately be fights and whatever. Like, our music is powerful, and we do have that power to like transform our environment. So, any hootie Rudy Tootie, I've already been on here like 90 minutes and I've taken up a lot of your time. I want to ask y'all to like, share, subscribe, continue to support the platform, especially Detroit is Different, because Kari's got a lot of stuff in store for you and for us. I'm gonna be more loyal to y'all as audience and supporters, and be on here every single week no matter what. And again, I'm not at the studio today because the roads were super slick and I decided to stay home, and I'm just doing my podcast from home today so I could be safe. But I wanted to make sure I brought y'all an episode. So I will be here next week. And if you want me to talk about any topics, I'll talk about certain topics. If you want to join the mailing list so that you get this podcast and the other one in your inbox, you can email me at pipercarter@gmail.com and just send me a note saying add me to the mailing list so I can put you all on the newsletter and let people know. And I'm going to be doing a lot of collaborations like with Norman and with Yolanda. So I'm going to be talking about the stuff that they're doing and amplifying it and making sure that we're all aware of what all they're doing, and as well as the food co-op, the farm, the stuff here. Detroit is Different. The stuff that I do, with community movement builders. There's so much good, like, positive things that our community members are doing that I'm going to be amplifying on this channel. So again, like, share, subscribe. Think about what I said. I'm going to be working on that mixtape. So if you know any music producers or rappers that want to get down, I'm figuring out a way to like work with people so we give them the bar as to like what we're looking for, because we need this life affirming music that we want to spread throughout our community. So I think I'm gonna lay it down here. And like I said, this coming Saturday is my birthday. I'm gonna be 52. So when I come back, I'm gonna be 52 years old. All right. And I want y'all to enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, stay warm, and peace.